Hi, my name is Adam Grady. I'm National Sales Manager for SKB Cases here in Orange, California. We're welcoming Focus ProAudio to our factory today to show you how we manufacture some of the world's most premier plastic cases. SKB was founded in 1977 by two college roommates, Dave Sanderson and Steve Kottman. Dave and Steve met in Long Beach going to school and worked together to design and come up with a plan for some of the world's most premier plastic cases to protect everything from musical instruments to audio equipment, video equipment, and beyond. Today, SKB is technically made up of three divisions: the Industrial Division, the Sporting Division, and the Music and Pro Audio and Visual Division. We're here in the Sales and Marketing building here at SKB, showcasing Focus ProAudio and your customers today some of the history of SKB. As I mentioned, SKB was founded by Dave Sanderson and Steve Kottman in 1977. Some of these pictures here are the history of some of how they got their early start in making plastic cases and developing what ultimately is SKB. Dave and Steve originally had started manufacturing plastic cases out of their garage. They actually had taken apart old industrial dishwashing machines and taking the heating elements out of them to be able to basically make what they used to transform and ultimately create what was the start of a vacuum forming manufacturing process. They basically we were able to heat plastic sheets up hot enough that they were malleable and able to shape them and fold them into molds for things like instruments and trumpets, saxophones, guitars, etc. Dave and Steve had originally met a gentleman by the name of Doug Brown, who owned a store called California Music here in Southern California. At the time, Doug had invited Dave and Steve to set up a shop and manufacture cases for him to sell in his music store in the back of his store. That went on for a number of months and was really a great start to the relationship. But unfortunately, one day Dave and Steve left the heating elements on overnight and burned poor Doug's music store to the ground. This is actually a photo here of them out front of what was left post-fire. So it was at that time that Doug had kind of said, "Dave, Steve, I'm sorry guys, I think I'm going to part ways and move on from the case business." So Dave and Steve at that time ended up finding a shop here in the city of Orange, California, and continued on with their dream to build cases, and that's where we're located still to this day. Hi, welcome. This is one part of our factory tour. This is one of our newest injection molding machine. We basically manufacture cases using three different forms of manufacturing. Injection molding being our most premier product and the most premier way we're producing and manufacturing cases today. This machine here is about 1.5 years old and is, again, as I mentioned, one of our newest machines. It took about 1.5 years or so for us to begin this process from the point we broke ground to when we manufactured and had the machine up and ready, running and ready to produce cases. Injection molding is a very interesting manufacturing process. It's very, very high technology, very low labor. So there's a lot of initial investment with injection molding in order to produce the machine itself that's needed for the process, but as well as producing the molds themselves. The molds themselves can weigh anywhere between 35 and 45,000 pounds just for the mold itself, which is part of the reason you'll see a crane system down here and the reason that the machine actually lives in a giant pit. When we ever have to change molds or switch molds in the machines, the crane will actually operate, move over the machine, pull the mold out of the machine, and then go back and set it down in the distance. When we get down to the other end, we'll show you some of the molds down there and how large those are and how uneasy they are to move around. And so this is one of our injection molding machines in action. Currently it's producing our 3i 2015-7 cases. And basically you'll see here behind me, the mold is now compressed. Once the mold is compressed, the plastic is being injected into the mold itself. That process again takes about 4 minutes. Once that process finishes, you'll see the mold split open, the arm will come down, take off the lid of the case and the base of the case, bring them down and drop them in the cage. As we mentioned, the operator is able to actually assemble majority of the case right on the line while basically waiting for the next one to come out of the mold. That's what this gentleman here is doing. He's basically putting the hinge pins in to assemble the lid to the base of the case, and then assembling and placing on the latches as well as the handles of the case. Once that's done, they'll be palletized, stored in our case yard, and then whenever we need to finish up the interior and the rest of the case, we'll pull it to the final line, the finishing line, and finish up the final product. As I mentioned with injection molding, the name of the game is the mold itself. These are some various different molds for different size cases that we have that we can change out to produce different sizes in our injection molding machine. Once the mold is loaded into the machine and set up, we can produce a case once every 4 minutes. And then basically the process restarts. The mold closes, the injection process begins, and the formation of another case begins. While we're producing a case inside the mold, the operator of the injection molded machine will basically begin assembly of the injection molded cases and complete a little over half of the assembly right on the line. They'll basically assemble the lid to the base of the case, put the hinge pins in, the handles, and the latches. What goes on the inside and the interior of the cases comes later in the process. But as mentioned, these are some various molds for different size cases for our injection molding machines. They're as I mentioned earlier in the video, they're incredibly heavy. Obviously this one here has a label, 26,870 pounds. So that's part of the reason, as I mentioned earlier in the video as well, that the machine lives in a pit, because we have a crane system which has to actually pick the machine up, the molds up, and bring them down to load them into the machine. So we have a 25-ton crane that allows us to make all of these different molds mobile and get them in and out of the machine itself. Hi, this is our rotomolding facility. Just like we just saw with the injection molding machines, this is a different manufacturing method. This is called rotomolding. In essence, what occurs is we strap large molds to a giant wheel. As you can see, this gentleman here, he's filling that mold with basically the raw material. Raw material for injection molding is like a pelletized, kind of a pellet format. This is much more of a grainier process. It's almost like a sand. They fill that mold with the raw material and then strap on the lids on the molds. They're basically limited by how many molds they can fit on a single wheel at a single time. As mentioned with injection molding can produce one case every 4 minutes once the machine is up and running. Rotomolding is a little bit more labor-intensive and time-intensive process. With rotomolding, they have to actually fill each mold with the raw material, bolt the lid on, and then they start the process. What occurs is the wheel will basically go through a section over there, which is the oven. That'll start spinning, and it gets up to be about 550 degrees in the oven. As the wheel spins, the raw material on the inside of the mold will liquefy, and basically through centrifugal force will be spread to the outside of the inside of the mold. Then once it goes through, it'll leave the oven and begin its cooling process. As it begins its cooling process, it'll eventually come back out and around. They'll remove the lid and then pull and basically remove the case from the mold itself. With rotomolding, the process is a little bit more manual of a process than injection molding. When an injection molded case comes off the machine, it is a finished product. It's very, very specific. No measurement or no tolerance. With rotomolding, there is a tolerance and a little bit of an error, meaning that the cases themselves require a little bit of labor after the fact to really polish them up and get them ready for a final product and to be shipped to the customer. As mentioned with rotomolding, when a case comes out of a rotomold, it's not exactly a finished product. There tends to be a little scrap and some other areas of plastic that we'll need to clean up, Dremel out, sand, and final is to really give you a clean, solid, finished product. You can see the difference here between one that just came out of the mold and the work that needs to be done versus one that's already had the work done and is cleaned up, sanded, polished, and ready to go. This is one of the maintenance sections of our factory here at SKB. With all of our molds, they will occasionally need maintenance, fill lines cleaned, and need to have some work done. This engineering area is basically where our staff is able to maintain and keep the molds in 100% working order and in proper condition. This here is actually a 20-ton crane that is used to lift the molds in and out of the machine. We just wanted to get you a close-up of that so you had an idea in terms of the size and the lifting power that it provides. As with injection molding, we're not only making the cases and the bodies of the cases themselves, but we're also making components that make up the cases. So for example, we manufacture and make all of these parts in-house for our cases, including latches, handles, cable pass-throughs, all of the extra components that may be featured as part of a case but isn't actually the case itself. This is an injection molding machine as well, obviously much smaller in size compared to the ones we were looking at across the street. But this is doing, again, a lot of the components of cases. This specifically is doing handles for our cases, which is obviously vital to the product. Again, similar concept, just on a much smaller scale. This is part of the area where we finish and finalize our cases. So once a case has been produced and been stored, it needs to have the interior and the rest of the accessories put onto the case. The cases make their way here, and either we'll have foam glued in, the padded dividers set up and placed in the cases, or if it's a custom case, we'll have the custom insert added and completed. Once from this section, the cases will basically be boxed up in the back and then sent to either the warehouse or sent out directly to the customers. My name is Adam Grady, and I'm the National Sales Manager for SKB Cases here in Orange, California. I want to thank you for coming on a behind-the-scenes look at a factory tour today on how we make and produce some of the world's most premier plastic cases. Thank you very much to Focus ProAudio for coming to visit, and if you'd like to learn more about SKB Cases, please visit focusproaudio.com.